I am so honored. This is our first knowledge exchange and lunch for the fall 2022. And I'm so honored that we have Joshua Loya to kick things off. I learned recently that this month is also National Disability Employment Awareness Month. And so I think that just gives further sort of credence to the value of this experience that Joshua is going to share with us. But you know, it's just really important. There's so much insights that we can gain. Joshua was part of our class earlier, and the knowledge sharing was awesome, and it will continue again shortly. Just to not take up too much more time, just to share that we have these monthly gatherings once a month. It's part of our engineering exchange for social justice, which is the mechanism through which in the School of Engineering that we facilitate engagement with community, and we work together with community. That's a key part to address whatever challenges, etc., but with the notion that we're trying to achieve social justice. And I should say social and environmental justice. All right, so without further ado, I want to just turn things over to the person of the hour, Joshua. And if that's okay, Joshua, the recording is on. Sure. Give you the floor.
All right. All right, thank you, Adesma. So I'm gonna say a few things. Maybe you've heard words like this. You're not good enough. You're a waste of time. It takes too long when you do things. It's not safe for you to do that. You should let somebody handle it so that you're safe and that you're in a more secure location. And you know, we want you to remain safe. We don't want you to hurt yourself. That gets said a lot more for people in our situation. I am blind, by the way, just in case anybody's curious. As far as sign language, that would be no help at all. But feel free to knock yourself out. I just want to notice it. Also, speaking really loudly, slowly, won't make much of a difference. But yeah, I am totally blind. I am kind of surprised to realize, I was looking at my resume, I have 5 third-degree black belts, ranks in like 7 styles or something, martial arts. I've been surfing for 5 years and change, and looked at my collection of trophies and medals. There's a few of them, and that's kind of wild to me, considering I only started surfing 5 years ago. But what's important, we'll get to that in a second. I'll go back to early 1996. I was 15 years old. I had several eye surgeries the course of a year. They didn't want me lifting weights. They didn't want me running. They didn't want me straining myself, because that could have sent me to the hospital and quite possibly have lost all my eyesight. So what do? 15-year-old kid that I am. We've all known that when we were that age, our ability to restrain ourselves and exert self-control was really well developed, right? Yeah, not so much. I turned up Pantera as loud as it would go, absolutely still a metal fan, and grabbed a pair of nunchucks, had no martial arts training, and I hit myself in my eye. And the last thing I ever saw was my dimming vision of the phone going, oh, shoot, only I didn't say shoot, on trying to find the phone to call for emergency services. That's the last thing I ever saw. Now, could I have just let it be there and just like given up? Sure. I still have dark days. I don't want to give you a false impression. I'm sure we all, those of us who are in this vision impaired situation can relate to that. But here's the thing. All of us experience some level of adversity, right? Some of us, it's the family we were born into. Some of it's a disability we were born with. Some of it's an injury. Some of it's a serious tragedy in our life. Might be multiple of the things along those lines, or it might be not very much. So we don't get to choose how much adversity comes to us, right? But we can absolutely do something about it. So people tell us, oh, you're not good enough, you're wasting time, you know, you're not any good at it, why even try? when I was 12, way before I was ever a martial artist, had ever set foot on a mat, I had a family member tell me, oh, you'll never be a black belt. You'll never be able to do this thing. And that can hurt. That can tell us that, oh gosh, that's not possible. Fortunately, I was really enthralled with stories. Even before I lost my eyesight, I was a giant Daredevil fan. And as much as we would like to wish it was, it's not a documentary. So, but I had that in my mind. And I knew the possibilities existed. My mother was also blind, it still is. She raised me mostly herself. And I found a way, I figured at the time that I had that eye injury, I had the option of further medical treatment. I decided not to, because it was in and out of the hospital. And I said, well, Josh, you're gonna have to be just as careful, probably more so. And there's a 50-50 chance of this working and you'll see less. What's the upshot? So I decided to be blind. And here's the curious thing. I didn't have to worry about losing my eyesight. So all the stuff that I wasn't allowed to do, I was able to explore that. That's when I eventually got into martial arts for real. Went water skiing, got into all kinds of crazy adventures that still probably distressed my mother a little bit. But so to that end, I was afraid. All of us get really afraid sometimes, and it can be daunting. The cure for that is to do difficult and scary things that we choose. I'm going to say that again. Difficult and scary things that we choose, that we find some enjoyment in. And it doesn't matter if you're good at them. So there are kind of four main things I talk about a lot when I give addresses like this. I'm going to zero in on one of them, but I'm going to tell you all four of them in case you want to ask me about them later. The four key things I hold on to are gratitude, expressing for it, remembering things, adventure, we're going to come back to that in a minute, service, and acceptance. So I do want to touch on acceptance because it's important to accept ourselves. Accept the fullness of who we are, not who people think. So on adventure, doing difficult and scary stuff. Is there anybody in this room, and feel free, or online, who doesn't feel fear? Is there anybody who's not afraid of something? Yeah, I figured, right? All afraid of something. Is there anything for us that is difficult?
Yeah.
Yes. Is it often the same thing for each of us, what's difficult and what's scary? Or do some of us have different natural tendencies in one direction or another? We all have different tendencies and things that are going to be beneficial for us. So eventually I got into martial arts. That led me to surfing. Now I got to tell you, actually I'm going to back up a little bit. I had already had a black belt. I had been training in martial arts for years, and I started judo. Why? I had avoided it for so long. Why did I avoid it? Because I was afraid of being thrown and not knowing when the ground was coming. So I did it. And that unlocked something for me. And then some of you who are my students at Braille Institute, you know that I left Braille Institute. Part of that was because I had an opportunity to train in judo full-time and really focus on my martial arts progress. I found surfing through that. And I had this whole chain of events, and now by some crazy happenstance, I'm on the National Adaptive Surf Team. All of that, though, because I was afraid of being thrown, and I did it anyway. And I learned how to do it. Did I ever get particularly good at judo? Not as much as other martial arts, but it unlocked the exhilaration of doing something that was challenging and scary. Some of you have been blind a while. The first time you walked across the street independently, if you've ever done that. Some of you haven't, and that's okay. That sense of accomplishment is something else, though, isn't it? That sense of accomplishment of doing something for yourself is huge. And so for me, the experience and training in judo, it gave me the courage to do something very scary. I had a really good job. I had medical insurance. They paid for my acupuncture. I don't know how many people have health insurance that can do that, right? But I left for uncertainty because I found something through my pursuit of what scared me. I found exhilaration and a vibrancy of life, and the warmth of the sun felt better, and the fresh air tasted sweeter. Now, going a little bit further, shortly after I started doing judo, I tore my hamstring. I couldn't walk for a little bit. And so I started, and I was afraid of people's reactions to what I had to say. So I started doing stand-up. Second time I ever did stand-up, a fight broke out in the middle of the comedy club. Full-on barroom brawl, actually. My guide dog at the time was about less than a foot away from having a chair thrown at him. So it was pretty wild, because, you know, we all know that people who hang out in comedy clubs, comedians, were very well-adjusted people. We don't get agitated whatsoever. But here's the thing. I did that because I wanted consequence. I wanted some stakes, something to scare me. And what I found is an unleashing of my ability to express myself. And if people didn't like it, I knew right away. If people aren't laughing, probably not digging you so much. If people are telling you to get off the stage with less politeness than that, you probably are not doing so well. But I realized I enjoyed it when I bombed. I still had fun. When we do something that is difficult and scary for us, that unlocks something very profound. It gives us a reference point that we can do what we thought was impossible, right? And when we're pursuing that, it's important that we don't have to get good at it. I chose stand-up because it didn't matter if I was good at it. I got really good at surfing when I finally tried it. I was natural, actually. It was kind of spooky. But the downside of that, I started competing right away within less than a month of formal surf training. And I stopped loving surfing because I thought it was about the performance. I'm going to open up to Q&A in a little while. But what I found is that I was comparing myself to other people constantly. I was comparing myself to my fellow competitors. Just like, oh, I see, I beat that guy, and he's never beat me once. And then I was the top dog. You know who? One of the people that I competed against in my last surf contest just a few weeks ago, he was a former pro surfer. He was a professional surfer before he lost his eyesight. I've been surfing for 5 years. He's been surfing his entire life. He's almost 40 years old. So who do you think is going to have more experience? It's a little intimidating. My board broke in half during that surf contest because this is during all those hurricane conditions we had a few weeks ago, right? If I focus on how well I competed and how well I'm stacking up on that other person, I'm missing the point. It's not about how well I perform, it's about my willingness to do the difficult and the scary. And then when I'm willing to go through that process, then I get to have fun. There are dolphins out there, right? I had an experience. I was out of the water for a while because I had training surgery. And I had this is going to get a little woo-woo. I'm sure you're really surprised. Guy who grew up in Northern California, lives in Southern California, and as a surfer gets woo-woo. I'm sure that's a shock. I had a dream that dolphins were coming to me and telling me, hey, come play with us. Come play with us. The next day I went surfing. It was my first time back in the water after 2 years, or not 2 weeks, 2 years, 2 weeks, excuse me. And there was an entire pod of dolphins. Wow. So completely connected to my dream. I'm not going to say they were communicating to me psychically. You can draw your own conclusions. But the point is that if we stay away from things that frighten us, and believe me, the ocean scared the crud out of me. But I went out there and I got to be around dolphins. I got to be in a place with someone who had previously been extremely nonverbal, this person who was on the autism spectrum. He was not able to speak very consistently. I can have full-on conversations with this person now because surfing unlocked something for him. Surfing unlocked something for me. Do I care if all of you surf? Well, it'd be fun, but it's fine. Not everybody's up for it. But what's important is to do the difficult and the scary thing. Because if we do the difficult and the scary thing, and this is, I'll tell you, if I have a bad day surfing where I get knocked around to the ocean, I don't catch anything, the rest of the day, I'm pretty good. The thing I didn't disclose earlier, I am blind, but I also was diagnosed with PTSD and major depression in 2017. Once I found surfing, the muting and compensation for my mental health issues became so much more manageable. Not easy, but more manageable. And the thing I want to talk about is as far as what's difficult and scary for you can be different. But when you do those difficult and scary things, it can provide a reference point that you're stronger than the obstacles that are in your way. I kind of want to leave it open for questions. I was going to mostly just talk, but I want to share one kind of conversation I had relevant to my shift in my thought process on surfing. So I would go out there and I would surf with my friends, and I'd feel great. I'd have the whole piece of the ocean. But when it came up to competitions, I was thinking about Aitor in Spain. I was thinking about Scott Leeson, who I used to compete against. Some of you guys know Scott. I know that I would stiffen up. I'd catch this amazing wave the week before in harder conditions. Then I'd go out to the surf contest and I'd choke and I'd get stiff. And thinking about the last wave that you were on while you're on the current wave, I don't know, I'm sure you can guess. You think that might distract me from the wave I'm on? There's a friend of mine, Ty Duckett, is a above the knee amputee. He also surfs. We like to say, live in the now or drown. Surfing is forced meditation. So if you're thinking about that other wave before, you're not thinking about the wave you're on now. If you're thinking about the wave after or anything besides, you're done. You're going to fall off. And connected to that, I started enjoying my wipeouts because it was just like a little hug from the ocean. Right? I'm a big Batman fan. And has anybody ever seen Batman Begins, the first Christian Bale movie?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
One of the things that Bruce's dad asks him at the beginning of the movie is like, why do we fall, Bruce? So we can learn to pick ourselves back up again. Right? So we find this thing that's difficult, we get back up and we try the thing that fuels us, gives that sense of adventure, that sense of, holy crap, I did that. And if we live those things more vividly, then we get to notice the things like the dolphins and the people that might have something to share with us. It's not important that you surf though. So incidentally though, if you do want to surf, last Sunday of every month in Oceanside, I coordinate with an organization called Waves for All. The last Sunday of every month, anybody who wants to surf up in Oceanside, please come join us. The one thing I want to talk about surfing and about anything else that is difficult, it's important to have the relevant information, to know that it's possible, and then to have the information necessary to do it. So I'm just curious, and shout it out because I'm not going to see your hands. I don't have psychic powers, I'm sorry. Before you met me, how many of you knew that blind people surfed? Did anybody not know that blind people surfed before they knew who I was?
I did.
Yeah. So, right. So we talk a lot about the value of representation. We talk about the idea that if you don't know that person did it, you don't even know that it's worth your effort to try for it. I mean, how many of us knew that there have been blind physicians and blind lawyers and blind people in politics? There was I don't remember his name off the top of my head. There's a visually impaired governor of New York for a while. And there's a whole range of things, but if we didn't know it was possible, and if somebody did it, we might not even know to try. So first off, if we're curious about something, let's try to find people in our community that are doing it. If we don't know, and we're just interested in something, and this is something I think that can be really, really powerful for the engineering students that are joining us, is to step back from our preconceptions. Right? One of the things I used to say to myself, and I got stuck in this trap when I got back into competition for surfing. I've done some martial arts competitions as well, but especially with surfing. I said, why can't I do this thing? Why can't I get out to the outside with more energy? Is there a built-in presumption there? If I say, why can't I do something? Can anybody guess what that built-in presumption is? What's the thing I'm choosing as a given?
But you can't.
Right. Right. So if I say, why can't I? What am I going to find? I'm going to find justifications why I can't do the thing.
Yeah.
What if I change that question? If I change the quality of question that I ask to, how can I do this thing? What's the built-in presumption there?
You're able.
Right. Now, is it possible that I'm incorrect and I try for something and I don't get it? Is it possible that maybe there isn't a way?
Yes.
But how do I know there is or is not a way? We have to go for it first, right? And so if there's a way that can be found, we have to take our step back and make sure we're asking a quality of question that allows us to answer, hey, I could do it this way. And maybe all you know is I need to know how to know if it's possible. So you pick your search engine of choice. It doesn't have to be the company that used to tell you not to be evil. Yeah, did you notice that Google took that out of their little edict there? They used to say, don't be evil. Apparently now we realize where our evil robot overlords are going to come from. They don't want you to know the truth. But all that to be said, asking the quality of questions that unlocks the answer. Doing the difficult and scary. You know, for some of you, public speaking is a frightening thing, but you like the spotlight. I'll admit it, because I tell jokes in front of strangers, much less polite than the words I'm using right now. Some of you, it might be starting a project that scares you. But here's the important thing, that where the value really comes in. When you do those difficult things that scare you, don't worry about the result. Pick something that's difficult. I would encourage all of you to consider something that you're interested in that is difficult and or scary. Hopefully both. Where it doesn't matter. It could be something like playing an instrument. If you're an engineering student, it doesn't matter how good at guitar you are. Probably not. If I don't compete, because I practice martial arts pretty regularly. I go to jiu-jitsu at least a couple times a week. Jiu-jitsu is really hard for those of you who've ever done it. There is no faking it. There's nothing like a 250-pound guy choking you with all his effort. You barely can breathe, and then after 5 or 6 minutes, you shake hands and you appreciate the love you have for each other. There's no faking it there. At the same time, if I don't get good because I'm not actually fighting for my life, I'm not competing, eventually, since I'm not worrying about whether I'm good or not, I'll take a look back after 6 months, a year, 2 years. In my case, with jiu-jitsu specifically, 9 years. Martial arts, okay, 18 years. I eventually look back at it and I go, huh, guess I know something better. And so that's where that gratitude thing that I talked about before is, if you think about, oh gosh, I've come this far away. It doesn't matter what you're good at or you know what's difficult or scary for you. What matters, excuse me for my stuttering today. The process is the point, not the result. The fact that you're in this class and in this group and you're trying to figure out solutions, yeah, is there value in the solutions? 100%. Are there value, is there value in competing and performing well and getting a trophy or a medal or a cash payment? Well, yeah, especially if you get paid for it, you take your friends out for dinner, that's great. Right? But is that really the point? Or is the point to have some sort of vibrancy of life? To have, all of us, we've had this really transitional 2 to 3 years. We feel disconnected from one another. We feel isolated. And as much as I love mainlining Tiger King or any other show, even if it has Carol Baskin, that we feel disconnected. At least I did. We feel less complete. So getting out and whatever level of connection we can have, maybe we're still being really careful. Maybe we're being not as careful because we're fully vaxxed, all that fun stuff. Finding a way to remember, hey, I don't have to just sit and let the world give me stuff. I can go out there and I can experience life myself. And I will tell you, when I worked at Braille Institute, this is nothing against Braille Institute. This is any organization. We had at least one committee meeting every week. How fruitful do you think most committee meetings are when you have 20 people who all have different perspectives of what should be done? Tedious. Tedious. Do you think it's as bothersome as somebody who outweighs you by 80 pounds choking you to the point of unconsciousness? I think we probably both know the answer to that. At least for me, the fact that my friend John wasn't choking me at that point, and yes, I asked him to, it was mutual, meant that I could put up with the tediousness of this other thing. I had an experience several months ago where I was wildly mistreated by a medical technician. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but my ability to bounce back from it was I had the reference point, well, this person, doesn't matter what this person thinks. I just dropped in on a 6-foot wave, a few days ago, and I went down the line. I just, took second place at a surf contest in Hawaii. I don't care what this person says about me because I have these reference points of how awesome I am. And so my encouragement to all of you, and I want to open up for questions if we have any time. My encouragement to you is to do the difficult and scary things that are difficult and scary for you. If you can find a way to do them without caring how quickly or how significantly you improve, then I think you'll find some resilience in dealing with all of the crazy ableist, weird discrimination stuff that you find throughout the day. If you don't have a disability, but other discrimination and prejudice you might have, it gives you a reference point for yourself that nobody can take away from you. You don't have to be performative for anybody because you know how well you did. So it's been a minute since I've actually spoken to a group like this. I want to open it up for questions that might give us a little bit further directions on some of this. And truly, all questions are welcome. If you cross the line, I'll tell you, but I'll do my best to answer anyway. Don't everybody speak all at once.
Josh, it's Rochelle.
Hey, by the way, Rochelle was one of my, and I'm sorry for Braille Institute people, Rochelle is absolutely one of my favorite students that I ever had. Just so you know.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
I want to say that Joshua was also, you're the reason why that I started doing the jiu-jitsu, and because it took away, when I first lost my sight, the ability to be angry because I was allowed to flip people, knock them down.
Yeah.
And I told my husband when I first started, I said, when I get good at this, I'm coming for you. and I've been held on to that, all these years because, you taught me as a blind person that I could do anything.
Yeah.
As a woman and as a blind person, because as a blind person, doors closed for me because
Sure.
I was blind and top of being a woman and a woman of color.
People make all kinds of assumptions about you, don't they?
Oh, yes. I couldn't do anything. I lost my job because I was head of all 8 pharmacies here in San Diego, Sharp Stealing. Just because I didn't get a chance to get it back.
Yeah.
I lost my sight. I lost my job. I lost a lucrative income because I was blind. And that's, I think, the anger and everything.
Yeah.
And meeting you, going to the Center for the Blind Community Center, and the Braille Institute, because you allowed me also to be a teacher at the Braille Institute. I was also a teacher. When Joshua decided to step away from it all, I filled in for him. I started teaching the computer classes. I started teaching students how to do a lot of things because of Joshua. I owe you a lot.
It was a privilege, and thank you very much for that, Rochelle. And that's the thing, right? I didn't really talk about it. This idea of service, you can serve other people. It doesn't have to be something you get paid for, although it certainly can be. It's not mutually exclusive. I got paid to teach Rochelle, but I was also doing my best to serve her, Tamara, Pam, the other students that are here, and people who aren't here. You don't know the ripple effect you're going to have on people. Does anybody else have anything else they want to add?
Yes, we have
or ask.
We have a question online.
Oh, great.
Hi, Joshua. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I'm a faculty member and I teach counseling and marriage and family therapy graduate students. And I have two questions for you. One, how do you think counselors and MFTs can address ableism? And two, if you wanted all the therapists in the world to know one thing about working with people that have disabilities, visible or invisible, what would you want them to know?
I think it's going to be a related answer for both. For some of us, our grief and our struggle is our visual impairment. For some of us, accepting it is for some of us. One of the difficulties I found, and I mentioned that I have PTSD, it doesn't just magically go away, but I manage it better. There is an assumption that is unfortunately very widespread amongst people that if they see somebody with a disability that's struggling, and I'm going to specifically speak to people who have a visual impairment, it isn't that my blindness causes my depression. There's an assumption that that's the case. The piece about it, though, is that our blindness makes the management of that more difficult. And so I can't, honestly, myself and other people I've spoken to, having a therapist assume that the reason we're struggling is because we're blind. It's not the reason we're struggling, though all of the logistics, including people assuming that that's the issue, makes it more difficult. So our blindness, our disability can be a magnifier of the struggles we're having. It may not actually be the origin. So I think to address the ableism, one of the big components of ableism within mental health therapy is the assumption that the disability is the main cause of everything. It's often not. And recognizing that and then listening to the subtlety of what that looks like for each individual patient, I think is going to be really huge for the mental health field, especially as it relates to those of us with the disability. It's not always the disability, it's the main thing, even if that's the thing that scares the therapist the most.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Please, anything silly? I know I haven't been doing a lot of comedy here, but I haven't learned how to do clean sets so much yet.
Josh,
Yeah, what's up?
I'm a big fan of stand-up comedy.
Sure.
And one thing that'd be really fun and challenging for me would be to make a trip from Imperial Beach to downtown San Diego on my own to visit a comedy club. And I'm wondering if there's a time and a place where you might be performing, that I could make that happen.
Sure. So depending on the timing of that, I'm gonna. I usually put something out on my Instagram. I hate Instagram. By the way, if you follow me on Instagram, don't get mad if I don't like your stories. I don't even look at most people's posts, but it is where I put my stuff. So I'll typically on Instagram, Joshua the Jedi, on Facebook, Joshua Loya. I'll put up there. So I regularly go to Madhouse Comedy Club. That's a nice open mic. I also really honestly like American Comedy Company a lot, downtown on 6th Avenue. I haven't been back to the stage for a little while. I had actually in June, I had a concussion that I didn't know about, had a seizure because of the concussion, got COVID. So it took me out for a little while. But I do intend to go back to the stage soon. And so the best thing, as much as I can say right now, is to check my Instagram. I'll keep posting when I have new comedy dates. But American Comedy Company and Madhouse, places that I usually go to work out my material.
How do we find you on Instagram?
Joshua the Jedi.
Got it.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine gave me that nickname. I'm not going to take Joshua the Jedi for myself, but if you're a giant Star Wars fan, if anybody can see I have Yoda on my forearm, I am going to run with that nickname like crazy. Anybody else, please? I like this Q&A thing a little bit better sometimes than just talking.
I wanted to speak to what Lily was asking about,
Mhm.
because before I ever became a blind person, I worked with people with disabilities for at least a decade. And my father was a disabled veteran, so I could say I grew up with disability around me. But one of the things I learned when I was a temporarily able-bodied person, as they
That's a great way to put that.
is that you just need to get out there and experience a variety of different people. I mean, one of the people that I worked with years ago is a man who's born without arms, and it didn't stop him. I mean, he drives a car without any adaptations. He gets out and hunts with a shotgun and a crossbow and stuff like that. I met people who were blind who ski, who get up on their roof and repair their roof, tile their kitchen. You just get out there and be where they are. And you could do it at the independent living centers or other places, but they're there, they're doing things, and it's very impressive.
So just having that reference point is kind
Just
of
having
true,
those
yeah.
reference points, yeah.
Absolutely. Actually, that was one thing I did want to mention, just briefly, in case you're wondering about how logistically the martial arts thing works. And anybody who wants to train with me, I can do that. It's part of my nonprofit that I'm building, Adventure Mind. It's one thing that we do is provide martial arts training to the extent that we can, even if people don't have the money to do it, to try to remove that barrier as much as possible. We work at least in cooperation a little bit with the Blind Community Center. But a lot of it is about connection. So if I have a physical connection, if my wrist touches that other person's wrist, I have a better sense of where they are. And then relationally, if I connect with other people, I know where they are. So it can both help in a training situation, in a self-defense situation, but also in a non-adversarial, cooperative, hey, let's figure some stuff out together situation. If we have that connection with the person, then whether metaphorical or literal, that can give us that reference point on how to navigate. So that information we talked about in the earlier session is really important. Anybody else?
One other thing I wanted to ask
Yeah,
you
of
about.
course, Tamara.
You and I had a conversation quite a while back about, you said you and Andrea were interested in trail guide. In other words, things that have descriptive narration for the blind along the trail. Didn't we have a conversation about
We
that?
may have. That's not a primary focus of what we would do, although, that could be really helpful.
Yeah.
I don't, that might not have been you and me, or if we did, it was probably a tangential topic.
I didn't know if you had some thoughts on that or how that would work.
Sure. I think that any of the times that, because I've done some more challenging hiking or climbing and things like that outdoor, the trick is to have the information. So that might be from a device, that might be from a partner, right? So if I go out there with my friend John, who's my surf coach, we generally spend our time in the water, but we've also driven jet skis together. We've gone on hikes. Yes, I drove a jet ski in Mission Bay at 50 miles an hour. That was fun.
Do you have a sign that says blind?
Yeah, well, he was right behind me, so we were fine. But the point is, if you have allies, so this is the thing. My Kempo instructor, who I studied with for quite a number of years, he hadn't taught a blind person before, but he was willing to work with me, and he was willing to learn to find out how best to teach me. And sometimes that actually can be a better value than someone who thinks they know. And actually, in some cases, somebody who thinks they know how to help us is worse. Oh, you don't want that, you want this. Did you ask me first? Just because your friend Tim, who didn't, who you saw at the bar 3 nights out of every month, does things a certain way, doesn't mean I do it this way. So I guess to our allies and those who want to make things better for us, what's going to help me is not going to be the same thing that helps Tamara. It's not going to be the same thing that helps Rochelle. It might be, but it might not be. And so that's another thing is on the ally side, ask what type, would you like some help? What type of help would you need? If for us as people with disabilities and even people in general, if something doesn't feel right, speak up or get out. Just because somebody is well-intentioned does not mean it's very helpful. I moved to San Diego in 2003. I didn't know the area very well, but I knew how to cross the street. Balboa and Genesee. Everybody knows that intersection. Many of us do. Can be challenging. So I was standing there at the counter, at the corner, waiting to cross, I think, Balboa. Like, almost 20 years ago. And very sweet, I think Vietnamese, because there's a big Vietnamese population on Linda Vista. But I didn't quite get it because I just got the accent. Sweet old lady. She might have been 70, might have been 80, I don't know. Guided me across the street. I wasn't in any hurry, thankfully. I waited a while for a while. I crossed back the street, and then I crossed the street I wanted to cross. Because she guided me across Genesee instead of Balboa. Because she was like, okay, you come this way, you come this way. I would have had to throw her into traffic to get her to stop. She was very insistent. She was a tiny little thing. I'm not into, I respect the elderly. I'm not going to do that. But that's my point, though, is that she was very well intentioned, but gave me the exact opposite of what I need. So my encouragement, if you're an ally, if you really want to help us, ask us. And then for us, it's a judgment call as to how impolite we want to be. And I usually try to be as polite as much as the person will allow me to be. If the person will allow me to just use words, awesome. If I have to yank my arm away, less awesome. And then it gets progressively less awesome as things go. My goal isn't to hurt people. My goal is for us all to find a way to work with each other. So the more we communicate and respect each other, the more we value consent, stuff like that, it's huge. So it's helpful and necessary when you're being an ally for somebody who has a disability, and remembering that just because somebody doesn't think you have the right to advocate for yourself, doesn't mean you don't. Even if it's a family member. Especially if it's a family member. I don't really have no idea how we're doing on time. We talked about that timer thing earlier. Again, I mentioned it before, but if somebody wants to make a non-visual, non-sounding timer, I would love you forever. Anybody else have a question or a comment or anything? And again, nothing's off the table. I truly, tell jokes about body parts that are covered in front of strangers. So,
Who's your favorite stand-up comedian?
it's really tough. I would say if there's a Mount Rushmore, I'll do it this way, and I'll tell you some of my favorites. On that Mount Rushmore, Richard Pryor.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, I'm not a big fan of his comedy, but I think he's legendary. So Lenny Bruce.
Oh yeah.
George Carlin.
Yes.
Yep.
This is going to surprise some people, maybe. But Phyllis Diller. Now, do you know why I appreciate Phyllis Diller so much? I don't remember how old she was, but she was already middle-aged when she started stand-up. People think, oh, you're too old to start. So it's a Phyllis Diller. But as far as the people I like right now, I absolutely love Tom Segura. I've just read his book. I'd like to play along, please. It's actually pretty funny. I am kind of like, I like the Burt Kreischer, the Joe Rogan. I like those guys. I also like Liza Schlesinger a lot, which is really good. I love Maria Bamford, who I actually got a chance to meet just a few months ago. I had taken some time off during COVID as far as stand was concerned. I was a little nervous to get back to it, and I went, and she was about as sweet as I possibly could be. She could have been, and very honest, very interested to meet Megan here. That's at my feet, but I was very respectful, and I really like her. She's honest. Anybody else? So I think I want to share a brief story that kind of illustrates the point of sometimes we make things bigger than they are. So I had paddled out with my my surf coach and really one of my closest friends, John White, who's part of Waves for All, the surf organization that I'm connected to. And we have a semi-secret spot in Carlsbad that we like to go to. And we went, I was building up my paddle strength and endurance. We paddle up past where the waves break. So probably another 700 or so yards west. So into the ocean. So it was super calm, very clear day. He said he could see about 60 feet below. And we're just sitting there on our boards with our feet dangling in the water. Who knows what's below us? And he starts telling me about all the sharks he's ever seen. So like, oh yeah, there's that one time I saw that juvenile great white that one time over at Churches, and you know, there's actually I saw a hammerhead here a couple weeks ago. You know, all right, thank you. Meanwhile, but the point is, sharks are there every day. They don't really put 6 deaths from shark attacks a year on a planet that's how many billions of people? But what did I do at the moment? I had to catch myself. I started getting nervous. And I had this kind of moment, and I think this was his point, that we can make ourselves afraid or anxious or angry or sad based on the framing of how we look at it. So we talked about before, when I lost my eyesight. Is losing my eyesight a good thing? In and of itself, no. I don't think, I don't care what anybody says. Your blindness is not the good thing. What you learned and discovered about yourself as you rose to the occasion, dealing with it, is the good thing. That being said, for me, there was some treasure in the midst of all that trash. I lost my eyesight, but prior to losing it, like I said, they didn't want me running. They didn't want me lifting weights. They didn't want me swimming because I might hit myself in the head. They didn't want me straining in the restroom, like point blank, without being gross, because that would have given me a retinal hemorrhage. I would have had to go to the hospital, get surgery. And so sometimes the thing we think is the most catastrophic event to us may still be a horrible, horrible thing, but it opens up some really cool opportunities. And sometimes we think that there's a bunch of sharks underneath us. We're right. But sometimes we focus on the sharks that might or might not be there that probably are going to leave us alone. And we forget about the dolphins. We forget about the coolness of being in the present moment without any thought of what came before or what comes after. My friend Harinder Singh, who gave me my Joshua the Jedi nickname, we were doing some Wing Chun drills actually. He, oh, you're moving like you're using the Force, you're a Jedi, right? He said that we need to make friends with change so we can enjoy the gift of the present. We need to make friends with change so we can enjoy the gift of the present. Talk a lot about mindfulness. We talk a lot about calm. All right, now I'm giving an advertisement for one of the apps I use, so mostly accessible. But just aside, if you're going to make an app to help people with meditation, make sure it's not frustrating to use. Yeah, it's not perfect, but you can't. There's some ways but in any case.
So Josh, I think there's
Yeah,
another question on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it actually is about an app.
Okay.
It's from Emily Bell, who's on the phone.
Oh, I know who Emily is, I think.
Yeah. Is there an app with voiceover that can help with street crossing and when cars are coming?
That is something you're going to want some help with, like some training with. I think to rely on application for that because of some of the data issues, right? it might not be the safest thing to use that as a primary. That being said, video conferencing, Ira has some of its limitations, but they could help you analyze a crossing. I would not rely on them or similar services to guide you across the street. So my one caveat is do not rely on it. Do not try to talk to somebody else while you're crossing the street. However, using something like Ira, or if there are other sources to help analyze, say, where the walk button is, how many streets there are, because sometimes you might have like a 2 on one side, 3 on the other. Something like Ira could be helpful, but I really would recommend not trying to lean too heavy on the apps and really more lean on your cane, your dog skills, and your ability to listen. And that's the other thing with like martial arts or other things. They can help you develop your other senses that you can pull into other contexts. So Ira, yes, as long as it's not something you rely on exclusively.
I beta tested Ira, at least the classes, and
Mhm.
they could not recognize the light across at least my street, which is 5 lanes.
Right, they might not be able to, and that's the point. Sometimes the visibility, what they have available, maybe it's glare, maybe it's the camera they're using, and maybe it does work, but maybe it doesn't. So I wish we got there, we could have little AI co-pilots wherever we go. We're not there yet.
We need more audible crosswalks.
100% we do. I lived in La Mesa, it took forever for them to finally put one in. There still is not one where I got hit by a car 6 or 7 years ago. So yeah,
And
we'll work on that.
it's been 7 years since I asked, and I've asked again and again. I did get one down, not several blocks from me, because I told them there were 70 new elder people now living in a.
Yeah, that'll get their attention.
That got their attention, yeah, but, you know, the main thoroughfare there at Grand and Ingram, they still have. Now I can't miss the buses, they've changed the buses, that I'll end up across the street and can't get home.
If there is, feel free to speak up if we have another question. I do want to say, as far as martial arts or surfing, if you're interested, I can help get you connected. And no, you do not need to be in shape already. Surfing can be for everyone, even with, or just about everyone, with the right water support. Martial arts, I have somebody I've worked with who is going through a lot of health issues. This person was supposed to die years ago, and yet they train every day. They defended themselves in self-defense situations, and they're quite elderly. They're not going to be a competitive martial artist, but they're healthier, and they have more tools at their disposal than they did if they hadn't been trained. So I just wanted to bring that out there. It's not an all or nothing thing with any of the things that I do or other things. So. Anybody else? I really am not a good judge of time, actually.
Did you say you have a guide dog?
I do, yeah. I have her name is Megan. I got her from Guide Dogs for the Blind. She is my 4th dog. Many of you remember Hobbs, who I worked with at Brown
Yes,
Street.
yes.
He is now living in Washington State. People who adopted him, one of the people works in a funeral home. And when people come in and dealing with the grief of their loved ones, Hobbs is comforting them. So for those of you who know Hobbs,
Yes.
Hobbs is absolutely doing good work.
Yes.
I have a follow-up.
Yeah,
Have you ever considered teaching your guide dog to surf?
I don't think I don't think she would enjoy that.
I know some do.
Yeah, I think I'm going to let her just kind of hang out.
Okay.
Yeah. So and she's curious, but she's not so much. I don't think that's her thing.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. So I just want to officially again thank you for your awesome words. I think so much food to continue to think about, so relevant to design, so relevant to life, so relevant to a lot of the work that we're doing at the university on diversity, inclusion, equity, and just a wealth of knowledge and insight.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege.
Thank
you. Be around if anybody wants to chat with me privately or get my information. I'm happy to exchange that because I understand sometimes it's a little intimidating to ask a question.
you.
Mark, we're at 10 a.m. Cam's not cooking up. Yeah, and Joshua knows Cam.
Oh, I love it.
I'm
Have you ever been